Rob Bartley, thank you so much for joining for an episode of After I'm Dead. This is great, man. You're an interesting you're a very fascinating person. You've got a background in oil, in energy. You're also an author. It's his energy is interesting thing. I really wanted to chat with somebody on this topic, mainly because of climate science and all the other stuff surrounding that. But there's a lot of emotion, and anytime there's a lot of emotion coupled with an inability to ask questions, I usually am like, all right, what's happening here? There's a narrative. This isn't maybe 100% accurate. There's somebody has like a mission statement more so than an actual, than maybe telling 100% of the truth. So, and this is probably most recently seen with like Greta Thunberg, who she's, 5 years ago, the ice melt is going to melt. We're all going to drown if we don't fix this in 5 years. And then 5 years later, she has to delete the tweet. Michael Schellenberger wrote a great book called Apocalypse Never with a question mark.
It is literally 2 feet away from me.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. He's amazing. The guy has and again, I think we get trapped in these binaries where it's like, hey, climate, the way it's being presented probably isn't accurate. That does not mean that we just destroy the planet that we live on. And there's a middle ground here where it's like, if we don't stop this now, we're all going to die. 2030 is right around the corner. Everything's going to come to an end. Like, it's just the doom and gloom. And we've been hearing this since the 50s, man. Since the 1950s, you can go up and Google this stuff and find videos of people saying in a couple years by, the late 90s, the mid 2000s, then it's by, in 5 years, now it's 2030. This goalpost just keeps moving. And I'm like, you know what? We really need to just chat with somebody who's in this industry, can approach this without superlatives and or rather hyperbolic emotion and statements, and just kind of tackle it as is. So I'm really thankful for that you took time to do this. This is, again, it's a lightning rod of a topic. It shouldn't be. We're just talking. It's just a conversation.
Right.
But tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, and maybe a little bit of background. And then I want to dig right into oil specifically, and why the prices are so high, and why it seems like it's impossible to fix this problem.
Okay, well, just a little background on me. So here, I'm a fun animal, for sure. My degree is actually in fine art with a minor in philosophy. So I started out with a BFA in drawing. Went and worked. This was during the time when you had to know how to code and to do anything like that, to put stuff on the internet. Did IT support for a little while. Got a job with a small oil and gas company where they needed IT help and marketing help. And the first thing they said is, computers. Help this geologist figure this out. And they hooked me up with a guy who was in his 70s learning GIS. At the time, it was brand new.
Was GIS?
So I'm sitting here teaching him geologic information systems.
Okay.
So it's everything that they used to do manually with logs and things like that, where they map the structures that are underground. And so I'm helping him because he doesn't know computers and I don't know geology. And in the process, started learning it and went, man, this is really interesting. I really like it. Went to my wife and said, look, I know this sounds really dumb, but I think I want to go back to school and become a geologist. And my wife was like, sure, go for it. So I didn't see any of 24 or Lost or any of the television during that time, but went back to school. Have done oil and gas now for 22 years. I've worked for a small company. I work for a public company now. The one thing that most people know about me when they know me is for 10 years I worked for Boone Pickens. Who was a billionaire. Yeah. He used to be the president of Mesa Petroleum, which is now, if I remember right, converted into Pioneer. But when I worked for him, it was when he was at BP Capital, which was an energy hedge fund. So I was still doing oil and gas stuff for him personally, but I was around all day the guys who were in the energy hedge fund, who were doing stuff like buying and selling oil and gas contracts, the equities and all those kind of deals. And so got an opportunity to see the energy world from a different side. The other thing that was fun is while I was there was when Mr. Pickens started pushing the Pickens plan. And that was right about the time that Obama got elected, 2008. And his whole point there was talking about transitioning away from diesel, more towards natural gas, using more wind power, more solar, things like that. And his whole point was that America has more than enough capacity to produce energy for ourselves. But by relying on the Middle East, we're paying for both sides of the wars. Because you have people who don't like us, but they do love our money.
Yeah.
And his whole point, especially with gas is always a local market. With the exception of when you liquefy it and transport it for ship, it's normally very local. So you put American people to work in America on American energy, and we keep that transition of wealth like local. We don't send it overseas to people who are going to use it against us.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem like that's a crazy idea. Seems like it's pretty
No,
smart.
no. And the funniest part was Boone spent all these years getting Republicans elected. I mean, he spent more money. I think he raised more money for Ronald Reagan's election than like anybody else the first time Reagan ran, right? And yet, when we got there, what we found was the Democrats were the ones in power at the time. They had the House and everything like that, Senate, Obama's in, and they got the point. Like they got it from the environmental standpoint because natural gas burns cleaner than diesel, and so as a result, you put less particulate matter in the air. And they do that like today at the Port Los Angeles and stuff like that, just for air quality reasons. So it made sense, and so we put this bill together to get it pushed. And the Republicans are the ones that killed it. Their whole point was that they didn't want to pick winners and losers, which is ironic because they were also taking money from the Kochs, who very much wanted to pick a winner or loser, because the Koch brothers used natural gas as feedstock for fertilizer. They also own the two largest ethanol plants in the United States, if I remember right. So, they're voting their own interests with their wallet, which, as you're wont to do as an American citizen, but it's not necessarily in the best interest of us.
Right.
So, at any rate, but yeah, working for Boone gave me a lot of insight. And since then, energy's been one of those things I've been really passionate about. I found that's extremely interesting. Every day I go to work, I learn something new. And it's a fun thing. So when I got the opportunity to talk with you about it, we have a common friend that put us together. He said, "Do you want to talk?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to talk about."
Yeah, this is it's such a weird niche industry. There aren't a lot of people. There's a lot of people in it, as far as it seems like, but it's like they're all kind of sequestered from everyone. It's like you guys kind of all hang out in like a little niche group, and no one really has access to you. And I think that
the funny thing about it is we're horrible at marketing. I mean, we're the worst at marketing.
Yeah.
We really are. And the reason is that we are universally hated. I am the bad guy from every Steven Seagal movie. The white Anglo-Saxon male energy guy that works in oil and gas is going to ruin everything. And you're typecast by it, and that's fine. I joke with my kids. My son goes to the University of Texas in Austin, which is a fairly liberal town. And when he talks about me to his friends or introduces me, it's like, "This is my dad, the writer." He never says that I'm in oil and gas.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, I get it. Why is that? Is it just because of the constant drum of like, hey, this is bad for the environment. We're polluting the environment.
I think there's a combination of things. Part of it is you can't get away from the fact that when gasoline goes up, it hurts people, like economically. When those gas prices start to trickle up, you have these big, huge signs right next to the side of the road, lets you know how much you're about to pay. And they don't do that with the other bills we have. If they did, I think a lot of other people would catch grief. Part of it is the stuff that we do is fairly complicated, and there's a lot of there's definitely things that go wrong in any process. And in oil and gas, we've definitely had these major spills and stuff, and they make wonderful news. So it's like when Macondo happened and you had the Deepwater Horizon event, right?
Yeah.
Like that was all over the news, justifiably so. But for everybody that wasn't tied into that, like we still all get the black eye for it as well too.
Sure.
Even though those guys were the ones that screwed up. And I think it's just one of those deals, like it's not entirely unearned. You should be responsible for what you do. Stewardship matters. Safety matters. Like
100%.
All those things make a difference. And, I don't think most people understand that anytime oil is spilt, we're more frustrated about it than you are. Because A, we put a lot of time, effort, and money, expertise into getting that out of the ground. But B, I live on this planet too. Like I have asthma. I don't want particulate matter in the air. I have 5 sons. Like I care about the world they grow up in. Yeah. And I also understand that energy can't afford to be exclusive to like one type or another. We have to continue to diversify. We have to continue to look for ways to optimize, how we're providing energy, because energy is one of the things in our economy that really helps lift people out of poverty.
Yeah. And that's actually, so this is one of my problems that I have with like the G20 summit, for example. Everybody flies in on private jets. They're all driven around in these massive SUVs. It's a very like preachy Like we got to be careful of this environment because, we're going to be in a bad place. It's like, yeah, but you guys, Nick, no one is, you're not living the life that you're preaching to everybody. You're just
Yeah.
telling me that I have to make cuts. And I think for a lot of sound minded people, we're like, what the fuck? Like, I don't want to it would be one thing if it's like, hey, across the board, everyone's going to feel this, everyone on the planet. But this is there's so different. There's so clearly like two caste systems. There's like information that only gets to one class of people. Then there's the rest of us that get the information. There's access to things that only happen for certain groups of people. Then there's the rest of us when we get the shit that we get. And I think this is, again, it's like and the concept too. It's like we're going to lower the planet's overall temperature by 1 degree in 100 years. That is not a great plan. And maybe it is, and I'm not an expert in this, and you can tell me where I'm wrong. But for me, I'm looking at this of like, okay, so none of the people who are responsible for this plan are going to be around in 100 years. So you just, threw accountability out the window. So that's one. Two, we actually have a legitimate problem with soil health and with honeybees disappearing, which are, I don't know if anyone listening or watching knows this, soil's pretty important, and honeybees, if you don't have them, you can say goodbye to your food. So if we are tilling the soil too quickly because the GMO crops are depleting the nutrients in it too fast in order to put food on the table for a growing population, how do we figure out a way to fix the soil health? That would be probably number one, because I've read and have heard that there's only about 60 tills of soil left, which is fucking terrifying because that's not necessarily 60 years. That's just 60 tills or 60 seasons of soil. Which might equate for years. Again, I'm not a farmer, I don't know, but this is, again, like these are the things that I want to have our leadership talk about, is like that. And then what's happening with the honeybees that are, transported cross country and get decimated to cross pollinate an avocado farm or an almond farm, which requires an insane amount of water, an insane amount of power, and is about as anti-green as you can possibly imagine. So there's like this, on the one side, it's like, hey, we have to be good stewards of our planet. And then the very next breath, it's, I'm going to do a bunch of shit that it doesn't even jive with anything I'm talking about. And it's that inconsistency where people like myself, who have found themselves in both political parties and are now completely out of the game and just independent because we are constantly having to defend the indefensible, that are like, hey, can we have a conversation about this? Can we talk with people and actually maybe find a way to not pollute our environment, but also not crush farmers in the process, which is what we're seeing what happened in Bangladesh. Denmark, thank God, just booted all those idiots out of office. The farmers took their farmland back. So like people are waking up to this. Like there's a way that we can do this, but it's not going to be a top down from like a government telling the farmers how to do it. The government needs to be like, hey, farmers, you're in this every day. How do we do this better? And it's not happening in energy. It's not happening in agriculture, not happening anywhere. And again, that's the whole purpose of this show, is just to have these conversations, and hopefully I don't get to, killed in the process for upsetting some like global whatever. But there's a lot to unpack there, but I don't know where you want to start in that, but it's like,
I like where you're at, and I can jump in on that one.
Please. Yeah.
So I think that one of the things that's interesting to me is education has so much to do with when we plan or do things moving forward, right? And in oil and gas, we do a very bad job of educating people about stuff, in my opinion. And unfortunately, that also extends to Washington, because when they try to make rules for us or do things for us, it's rare that they have experts that have any actual time in the industry or expertise to know what they're doing for us. And that's not just in oil and gas. That also extends to solar. That extends to what's going on, with wind farms and things like that. They're not technical, and they'll take kind of the PowerPoint you give them more often than not. But where that's even more frightening, and you pointed out, the stuff in Denmark and things like that. There's a concept that people need to Google or look up called Lyshenkoism. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, so as a scientist back in the days of the early Soviet Union, Vladimir Lyshenko. Okay, he was a minister of agriculture or something along that lines. And at the time, this was right when people were beginning to learn things about genetics. And there were a lot of geneticists saying, look, we have one type of wheat here, but we need to start doing some cross-genetic work on the type of wheat that we plant, because the wheat that we're planting is only eating up certain nutrients in the soil, and it's also susceptible to these certain diseases. We need to be more resilient and work on that. And Lyshenko said, no. That's not the reason our wheat is so good. Our wheat is so good because of our communist principles and our communist way of farming, and that's what it is. And the geneticists were like, no, that's not it. And they went back and forth a little bit till Leshchenko did what the state did back then.
Just
They
killed
rounded
somebody.
up all those geneticists and sent them off to Siberia, and that was
Yeesh.
done. Then what happened shortly thereafter? Massive wheat shortage, massive problems, a lot of people starving for it because this one guy took the politics and put it above the science and put it above paying attention. My industry in oil and gas specifically, we've evolved continually from the first wells that were drilled way back in the Standard Oil days in New York, to what we do now. And I can tell you in my building, for example, company I'm with has probably 400 people. Half of them are STEM, at least. I can throw a stick and hit an engineer without trying. It's not hard. And we have all those engineers and all those people because what we do is expensive. Like you have to have people that are smart, that know the process. That's one of the reasons safety is a huge thing to us too. So like when I see some of the stuff that comes out in the news where they're talking about what happens with wells, 9 times out of 10, it's either a very old well or it's a company that does not spend the time and effort and money that they should. And I think that's where regulation comes into play. And that's where, honestly, states like Texas and New Mexico and Oklahoma and Alaska have done a really good job in that their local officials and state officials really understand what we're doing. Most of them have degrees in petroleum engineering or something like that. They've been in a company. They understand like what safety regs that we need to fit into. It makes it harder when you're dealing with the government because you get a lot more of the top-down solutions from people that don't know what we're doing. But we can still work around those things. It just makes that process more expensive, more timely, which then ends up getting passed on to consumers.
So
At
why
least
don't you guys do it? Well, sorry not to interrupt you, but why isn't there a better job done in the education game? Because that's, it's something that I for sure the green movement has done. Like the climate movement has done an amazing job. They've got this
sure.
like very repetitious drum. And this is my problem, I think, with politics is that, or any of these things or any of these narratives, it's like, it's just become, it's like politics is basically when the green movement is very much that it just becomes like music without the chord progression.
Right.
It's just you're saying lyrics. Like how many songs do you know the lyrics of that you just repeat or you sing along with, and you're like, if you actually thought about it, you're like, this is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. It doesn't make any sense. Like they're just like
Sure.
half the time it's just words that rhyme together. And so, and it's funny because you ask there's interviews with like the musicians and it's like, what does this mean? It's like, what does it mean to you? Because they don't, it just rhymed. It didn't.
I went to art school. I can play that game.
But it's like this strange thing where we ape like these talking points and we're like, we've gotten into such a habit. We're not even thinking about what these words even mean anymore, which is so frustrating. So it's like, to your point, like, why aren't we doing a better job educating? I mean, I guess we can with like small shows like this and
Sure.
we can try to get the word out, but why doesn't the energy industry, which is fucking huge, a massive industry with a lot of resources, why hasn't there been more of an education push to be like, guys, like the green thing's great. Don't get me wrong. Like we need alternative modes of energy because I don't know how much oil is on the planet. I'm sure it's finite. I don't know where we are in this whole thing. And new technology, great, fine. For as far as like extracting oil, there's like shale, for example, which is its own. Right. There's a lot of controversy around that too because of what it does to the ground from how you extract it. And so, yes, we need alternative energy. I'm all on board, but it's like it can't come at the expense. And this also gets into the cost of living that you mentioned earlier. Right. Green energy is not cheap. So we have a poverty problem in this country and throughout the whole world. So you're not going to push people into green energy that's so incredibly expensive. You're going to further push them into poverty. You need inexpensive energy that's cheap, that like coal, for example, oil and natural gas, like these are inexpensive fuel resources that that are required to get people out of poverty. And I think once we get people out of poverty, then we can focus on some of these other problems because everything disproportionately impacts those that are impoverished. I mean, again, it goes back to education, but outside of that, maybe start there and we can get into the other.
So I'll throw you a fun one here. You remember the Paris Climate Accords?
I do. Yes.
They said we're going to sign up for climate accords. Every country is going to have a CO2 level. We need to hit that target of decreasing to that amount. That's what we're going to do. And Obama put that in. Trump rolls in and immediately says we're not going to do that and pulls it out. Okay. And there was a big debate, like right when he got into the office about it. You want to know the irony? America's already hit its CO2 level. We're fine. We're under our limit. And you want to know why?
Huh.
The reason for why is natural gas, because more coal-fired plants got shut down. We started putting more natural gas into electric for our electricity, as far as generation, and that decreases the amount of particulate matter and the amount of CO2 because it burns cleaner. So, like, hands down, the industry did that without any government help. They were like, we need to lower it, and we just said, hold my beer.
Yeah,
We got you. And it's not a big deal. For us, it makes sense. And it goes back to what you were saying a second ago. It has to do with economics. What can I do to provide the goods cheapest? Because we're competitive. Like, if I sell my oil for $80 and someone else sells it for $70, they're going to buy all the 70 faster than they buy my 80. That's just math.
Yeah.
That's how all energy sort of competes in that sense. So, like, a lot of the green energy stuff that we put out right now, the only reason it really works is because we have tax incentives for it from FERC. FERC, or
What's that?
FERC I think it's federal. I forget the name of it, but it's a environmental quality tax dividend that they give. So what's interesting about that is, like, when I worked for Boone and he was doing the wind farm,
Energy Regulatory Commission is what
there you go.
FERC
Thank
stands for.
When I was working with Boone and he was doing the wind farm, one of the things that we knew is our competitor was natural gas. If you could produce electricity with natural gas cheaper than we could do it with the wind farm, then people are going to buy that electricity first, as opposed to doing the wind stuff. And for us, we had the wind farm set up, teed up. We were ready to go. He had already got the land. We had everything ready. He had spent, I think, around $500 million queuing this thing up. And then they discovered the Barnett Shale. Natural gas prices dropped to about $2 per MCF. And suddenly our $5 electricity could not compete with that $2 electricity. And boom, we're out of business. Like, you ask him, and there's funny interviews with him because he was just very plain spoken. He'd tell you, he was like, dude, he was like, yeah, I went in to win and lost my ass. That's just how it is.
That is $500 million, man. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Oh, yeah.
What happened to all that infrastructure that was built? Did it get
Well,
used
the funny
at some
thing
point?
is, like, some of the stuff that we had built, we ended up selling off to other people. I think some of it went to Canada, if I remember correctly. Okay. But, like in this week, for example, Germany is big on wind, right? They shut down their last atomic plant because they're more centrally governed in the way that they handle their energy. And they're already planning on buying energy off other people.
That's another.
And that because of that, if you go and Google, like today, energy prices in Germany, like, people are already complaining about all of a sudden all their energy is going to cost more. Yeah. And that's the deal. Like, when the government interferes in the sense of, like, trying to push, like, one in front of the other, that economy always moves faster than them, and the prices end up going up, and then the consumer gets squeezed. And that's not what we want, because like I was saying with poverty, you have all these developing nations that need energy. They're not going to sit in the dark forever so that we can go green. Like, you can't ask someone, be poor, don't feed your kids, and sit in the dark and expect them to be all right with that. So what are they going to do? They're going to burn wood. They're going to burn dung. That's bad for the environment.
And that's funny you bring that up, because I keep hearing this over and over now. This is a phenomena that's happening more, where people are now burning wood or literally dung in order to heat their homes. And that is horrible for the environment. Way worse than oil.
As quickly as we're putting that natural gas plants online for electricity, China's building coal plants. Yeah. Because they don't have the same natural resources. They have a huge population. They don't have the resources to support that. They have to end up pulling energy off of Russia. So, like, China will always kiss up to Russia to some degree, because Russia has loads of resources, but not as many people. And their economy is much smaller than what China's is. And China needs that energy to develop.
Yeah, I wonder, how we can't. Is it just the politics of just special interest as to why we can't just go full steam ahead with everything? This is, again, where I get so frustrated, is that like it's one party gets in, it's like, we're going to do it my way. And then they're like, the other party is like, fuck that guy, we're going to do it my way. And then we just oscillate between these two binary values. I'm like, can't we just do everything? Can we not just do it all? Can we just do that?
The thing about it is I feel like the most valued way that the United States at least can handle it, not globally, but at least for us, is just if government will stay out of the way. Like, let us develop and work, because I tell you right now, the innovation on it It's the same thing as your car manufacturing. You can set targets if you want, and you can tax things that you don't like and give incentives to things that you do all day long and try to manipulate that market. But at the end of the day, there's a consumer on the end of it, and that
Mm-hmm.
consumer is going to make the decision that's best for them. And so, as companies, like, we still have that responsibility to pivot to the thing that's going to make the consumer happy, because their dollars are what fuel our business. And so, I can tell you right now that, with oil and gas, when people, we have all this push with electric cars, and there's issues that I can bring up with electric cars, but there's issues with combustible engines too. Like, we're all aware of them, right? But the thing about it is until the individual consumer decides they're going to pick that up, it doesn't really matter one way or the other, like how the government leans on that, unless they just plain outlaw something. And then you're going to get the law of unintended consequences falling on your head, like, automatically. And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that hurts, is that you get a party in, and the party, all they care about is pleasing a small constituency of the people that make the loudest noise on the outside, or somebody that gave them cash on the way up.
Mm-hmm.
And they come in and put some law into place, not understanding our industry well enough to know, like, how that's going to affect it. And then they're shocked when the price went up. We don't know.
Yeah, it's very, the money in politics, man, that is something that I don't know how to solve. And I'm a fucking nobody. So it's like, I wouldn't.
I have a theory, and I don't know that they'll ever do it. I think every politician should sign off immediately that we just take all those people they just hired for the IRS, and we put them all to work auditing just our elected officials and their families.
I mean,
I think that would get support on both parties' side, not by the politicians, though.
If you want to go into hypotheticals of how to solve it, yeah, that's one way to do it.
They won't do it. That's like term limits. They won't do it.
No, I know. They've look. It's like the Pelosi's, man. I mean, what is she making? 180 grand a year, and she's like worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, those two numbers don't jive. And like, she's got a better trading record than the top people.
Yeah, it's funny. There's actually there's a fund that literally does nothing but follow her filings and just lets people know what to invest in off that. Like, that is an investment strategy.
That's a great strategy. Yeah, I think I read or saw. I'm trying to remember the publication, but it was something like the Congress, like the people in Congress have a better performance portfolio from their public filings than anybody in the private sector.
Oh, they dominate the S&P by a long shot.
Yeah, it's like, how does that happen?
It's almost like they know which rules they're going to pass, and what agencies are going to okay which drugs, and who's going to get the big contracts for semiconductors.
Well, that was
crazy talk.
There was, you talk about like some of the crazy stuff, like Fauci. I saw a thing. His net worth went from like 4.6.
Yeah.
Was it 2020, and then in 2020, 2021, it jumped to 12.4.
I believe those guys are allowed to keep royalties on things.
Oh, dude, he for sure made money off of that shit.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why he was getting pressed by Rand Paul about, like, are you making are you making any money? He's like, frankly, I don't have to tell you anything. It's like, it was like, come on, man. Like, it's like such it was like, you didn't even have to. It was like when Kimmel was making fun of Aaron Rodgers for talking about the Epstein list, and he's like, you better get that concussion protocol checked. And it's like, you just admitted you're on the list without even.
What we found out is that the only safe document in the United States is apparently Epstein's client list.
Oh God, I know, dude. To talk about, it's so crazy the world we live in, where it's just like everyone knows this guy just was off. Everybody, and it's just like, it is what it is. Like, there's just no one's gonna look into it. That's just the thing. And even like the reporters that got close to it, they've all been like, all right, we're done. It's just, it's wild, man. Like, I don't know whose name's on that list, but like the actual,
I've seen a flight record pass around on the internet every once in a while, and there's a lot of names on that list.
Well, that's where I think that's where they got Kimmel's name on that list. But it's like, and there's a couple other celebrities. There's actually a lot of celebrities on that list, but it's well, again, this goes back to that 2-tier system of justice, or like access for someone but not for you, and then or information for someone but not for you.
This week with the guy that had the Discord server that showed all those documents that got picked up on the war effort in Ukraine.
Well, man, that is crazy. That is this, the story is that kid, not the unbelievable lies that came out of the Biden administration for
Right.
what we're doing.
So,
We have special forces on the ground in
oh yeah,
in the Ukraine.
people that
U.S.
got
special
endangered
forces.
that day.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is crazy. That, and you go back to his bumbling speech in the Ukraine the last time he was there. Maybe not the last time, but the time before, where he said that we're going to have U.S. boots on the ground, and everyone's like, "What? You're going to bring the U.S. troops coming to the what? What are you talking about?" And the White House is like, he didn't mean it. It's just a misstep.
It was a Joe gaff.
Yeah, and as a Joe Gaff, it's just one of those things. He puts his foot in his mouth. Don't read into it. And I was like, you know what? I guarantee you, we're gonna have boots on the ground. He probably slipped that by accident, and then bam, here we are. Same thing with Nord Stream pipeline. That was wild that he was in Germany on the press conference, and you can look all this stuff up. It's online of him being pressed by the reporter, and he's like, "Oh, we have ways to shut it down."
Here's the funniest part to me when that happened. Once again, being in the industry, I have a different kind of knowledge and take on pipelines than what normal people know, because you used to know there's pipeline at the bottom. Those pipelines are not easy to get to, and those pipelines are not they're not thin either.
No,
so the average country does not have the expertise to blow something like that up, and I doubt very much Russia just decided to do that because they're making money off of it.
Well, that was the Seymour Hersh article that came out, and then they're in the New York Times, like, oh, this is what did they say? They had an article that was released that said the information about it would be too damaging to the public. Like, this again, the censorship thing. Like, I'm just so burnt out on it. It's also just happened with the Nashville, the shooting in Nashville with what's his face or her face. That whole thing, like they're not releasing the manifesto because it's like, oh, it's too damaging. And I'm like this concept of adults being infantilized by like, oh no, this information's too harmful for you. The only harmful information is the information that's suppressed. That's it. And it's this constant thing that's like, if you have nothing to hide, then why won't you show it to us? And there's something that we need to be aware of collectively as a society, then we need to have that information. And if we keep treating people like they're stupid, people will continue to be and act stupid. Like, you have to give them that ability to see what happens and where and why. Now, granted, there, I'm not also like, I don't look at the world through like, a child's eyes. Like, there are some horrible things out there that the government does need to keep from people. But are we going to get to a place where just like nothing comes out? I mean, how censored is the news now? How censored is just information in general? And then again, it's like, then you get into this place where there's an owner of information and they will decide what you can get or what you don't have access to. And then stuff like this conversation gone. You have things like, hey, how do we educate people around oil, energy, natural gas? How do we do this in a way so that we can, pull the emotion out of the conversation and actually give people information? That would be gone because some special interest a-hole is going to say, nope, this is going to hurt my wallet. I don't want these people having this info. So I don't know the path forward to this, but more censorship is not the answer. It's causing crazy problems.
So it's funny you say that. I'm going to throw one of my theories out there. I've not heard anyone else say it, but I'm going to just kind of walk you through what I tell people that I noticed in the time I've been alive on this earth. Okay. One of the things I find funny is when I grew up, there were 3 major news channels that were on television. Those were the ones you watch. Cable came along later and you had cable TV, and suddenly you could see things from around the world instantly, and it changed everything the way that it worked. Then we had this little disruptor right here pop up.
Oh, I hate him.
Right?
I hate him. I'm about to get a flip phone. I fucking hate this.
So when that popped up, that was a thing. The cell phone gave us instant ability to talk and sat phones and all that good stuff. But when the internet showed up and social media came along, that's where the world that we're in right now is still in growth pains, not knowing how to handle it. And it's been really interesting because if you think back when Obama was in and Clinton was the Secretary of State during that time frame, okay, you had the Arab Spring happen because horrible things would happen in those countries, but the populace didn't know what was going on. All they got was the official news from that area. But then suddenly with Twitter, they could show a picture of some lady getting beaten in the middle of the market for no reason whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, whoa, wait a second, that's wrong. Like, that's not okay. Or some dude's getting carted off and then they just get disappeared. And they're like, whoa, that's not okay. And suddenly you had all these disruptions hit the Middle East because they're really oppressive regimes there. They keep a tight control on their people. And like suddenly they're freaking out. And you had major countries over there shutting down the internet at times, killing social media at times, all that kind of stuff. Then what happened is that sort of rotated and it moved into a more democratized area of Europe. And that's when you had Brexit come along. Like, here's the EU. We're going to build this shiny, happy future where we all work together and we share the same cash. Yeah, Greece is going bankrupt, but don't worry, guys, we can carry them. It's going to be fine. Like, we're going to work together so we have the economic might that we want. And then suddenly people started realizing, wait a second, this isn't in my best interest. And they could talk back and forth about it across the nation without having to go through the common thread of the media saying, hey, this isn't working out for you. Mm-hmm. And they throw that vote up there and everybody said, oh, no, Europe's never going to break. They're never going to break. And at that point, England was like, we're out. And they were shocked. Well, it happened here too. It happened here too with Trump's election. Who thought Trump was going to win? You had 17 guys.
I think they even said
go
Trump
up on the Republican nomination. And I laughed. I laughed because out of 17 people, Trump was 17 on my list.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, there's no way. This is just a rich guy who's a bit of a narcissist that just wants to do this for the gag because he can say he ran like, oh, I could run a company. I can run this nation. But then one thing happened that nobody else expected. He went up there and didn't play politics. Like all the other guys were trying to box politics like Marcus Queensberry rules, right? Mm-hmm. Throwing jabs and punches. He was doing MMA slams and choking people out and just burnt his way through them. And the only ones that went to the end were the ones that made a deal not to fight him. And in the end, it was a cult of personality win for him for one reason. People in the United States had these and Facebook and they were mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, you can't say that Trump was anything other than a middle finger to the elite class because the perception of most of the people that I know, and I've lived down here in the Bible Belt in Texas, so you can, politics aside, even in that group, was people were just tired of being told that I'm the reason that everything's wrong.
Well, I think,
dude, I'm just working and doing a job. No, I'm not. But I think that cell phone, that social media anger just got amplified by the algorithm because it's clickbait and that's what keeps you coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that the Donald Trump thing was fascinating. I find myself, he was, I know, like for myself, like I was not like when he first ran, I was like very much like, okay, this is not real. This guy's a reality TV star.
Oh, sure.
This is like there's a stunt here or something for ratings or whatever.
I kept waiting for anybody to pull it out but him.
Yeah, and then
when he got the nominee, and I watched all the people show up for the rallies, I was like, we're not going to win. We're not going to win. I watched Romney, who was a very competent person. I didn't agree with everything on him, but he's competent. And I was like, Romney didn't win because, fairness, Obama just dunked on him. And John McCain, don't even get me started.
Yeah, but they were both terrible candidates. Mitt Romney is, I'll just say that I'm not a fan, and I'll leave it at that. That guy is, I mean, if you go back and you watch a debate with him and Obama, I remember very distinctly watching those debates and being like, is he throwing this? Because like Obama, I can't remember the exact detail of the debate. If you go back and watch it, there was multiple times where he like Obama had contradicted himself very obviously, and he just never got called out on it. And I was like, what is this strange thing happening right now with this debate? I feel like this is like canned, which is probably what happened. Like the two-party system, it's like that's a whole other thing too. And I think why most people voted for Trump was because he was an outsider and looked at the system. And again, it's just, like I said earlier, it's like I've been a Democrat, I've been a Republican. I've completely ejected from both. Sure. I find myself very independent because of everything that I mentioned earlier, like the Pelosi's and the amount of money that they have from clearly what has been a life of influence from, her being in the position that she's been in. And she's an incredible politician. Don't get me wrong. She's very smart and unbelievably savvy. And clearly knows what she's doing, but it's like at the expense of, it's like, how much is it always going to be at the expense of other individuals? Is there not another way that you can profit without it being on the back of somebody? And Mitch McConnell's the same fucking way. Like that guy sucks. He sucks. Like these are, and I get upset about this because we have a representative form of democracy, and these people are not representing our interests. And when you have a bombastic personality like Trump come along and goes, "This whole thing's fucked. All these people are corrupt, and they don't care about you, and I'm going to fix it." It's like, yeah, of course. And it's the savior complex, which is always something to avoid. And I've got a gazillion criticisms about Trump, specifically his inability to ever moderate and pull back away from his bombastic personality and try to unite the country. He never really did that. But it's like, of course, people were quick to jump on the Trump train because look at what he stood for. He talked about him standing for all the people that didn't find themselves in either party. There's the name Rhino that exists for a reason, Republican in name only.
Oh, for sure.
And all of the conservatives, or maybe right of center, just right of center to right of politics that have, that just have nothing to do with the Republican Party because of the quote unquote rhinos. And I think that we're seeing it happen in the Democratic Party now, where people are starting to be like, yeah, these, like the people that are Democrats, like myself, who broke away, and they're like, these people don't give a shit about me. They don't care. Like, I live in Chicago. I have heard for the last, God only knows how many elections, about like equality and fixing like the South Side of Chicago and more opportunity for education and economic improvement. And what has happened? The answer is fucking nothing. Nothing, to the point now where the city is so bad that I'm leaving. I'm actually moving to Texas. I'm out of here. I can't get it fixed. I talk to people about this stuff all the time, and it's not getting any better. So I'm out. It's like, there's two places you have power in your life: where you spend your money and where your tax dollars go. If all this is about money, this is really what the system is that we live in. There's two places that you then have power. It's who you give your money to, just like you were talking about earlier with Boone Pickens' plan. Like, why are we giving money to the people that hate us, that are going to use that money to hurt us? And it's the same principle there. This is very simple. And then if you can move to somewhere else that's more reflective of your values, or a place that isn't completely corrupt. There's a lot of shit in Texas I don't like, but it's like, here in Illinois, like, I'm out. Like, we've gone to a place of pure craziness between all of the laws that, like, the personal rights that are being pulled away, what happened over COVID with JB Pritzker running like small business and medium business.
Yeah, y'all had a rough time with COVID.
Oh, dude, I'm just burnt out. I just want to live in a place that values free expression. And like I said, I know Texas has a couple things that are off the rails in that. I'm not completely
we definitely do.
But I mean, again, it's like, this has been my main argument for a lot of the things here has been, there's a better way to do this, and the political parties are not, the representative form of democracy is not being adhered to. It's just not. Like, these people are going into power, and then they're representing the special interests and the lobbyists who are giving them money, and we're getting screwed. And that's why Trump became Trump. Man, I don't think it's more complicated. I think
the thing that I looked at with Trump is he's a salesman, and he always marketed stuff. He's always known how to. So he was at least reactive to the fact that he knew what people wanted to buy, and he sold it. Now, whether or not he delivered it can be varied, I think, on topic. Like, you can go down the line. There's a lot of things he said he was going to do. He did do. There's a couple of things he pulled out that I was like, I didn't know that I wanted that, but yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Go ahead. And then there were a couple places where he just objectively failed. But to your point where you're talking about with politics, there's a word that is missing from the people that we send to Washington or to our state capitals, or sometimes even the mayor's office. And that goes to the word stewardship. There is no stewardship. People never look at the responsibility that they bear. Everybody wants the rights. Nobody wants the responsibility. And it starts at an individual level, even in your own household. And like, I try to instill that in my kids, and that you need to be responsible for yourself. And then once you can do that, you can be responsible for other people. And once you pick that responsibility up,
that's a great point.
You have to do right by them. If you don't, you're a tyrant.
Yeah, and that's again, it's like this rules for thee, not for me thing that's just been really snowballing out of control. And again, why I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do this thing. I don't know what's going to happen with this show, but I know I talk with some folks, and they're like, it's like, there might be some interesting points that come out of it, and maybe this influences somebody else to do something, and then that influences another person, and that has a positive impact on the world. And so it's like, it's all I could really ever ask for with this, I don't know, project, whatever you want to call it. But as I say in every episode, it's like we're not leaving a very positive environment for the next generation, and that's my issue more than anything else.
And I think that's where, at least in my front, that's the reason I kind of laugh about being the bad guy in oil and gas, because you have to be the happy warrior. You kind of have to. I always look at it this way. You can be negative and live in drudgery, but then who does that benefit? It doesn't benefit me. So
Yeah.
why do it? And so the thing that I know is that at least in the projects that I touch, I make sure that everything that I do works to the best advantage of our investors, because whether or not you know it, you might be invested in our stuff if you have a 401k. I don't know.
Mhm.
But my whole point is that, we're drilling wells with other people's money. I want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. We're doing it the safe way, that we're doing everything that we can do to make that process work right. And it's a complex process. It's one that most people don't understand. Like when we were talking
Yeah. Can
about
you
who
actually,
the bad guys.
yeah, sorry to interrupt you again, but like, can you even just talk about like, what does it take to get a gallon of gas in your car? Like,
Yeah,
like people just pull. I'm so guilty of this. I try to constantly like pull myself back to like really think about the world that I'm in,
right.
and it's easy to do because we have these stupid phones that are
Sure,
constantly
sure.
distracting us. But I feel like there's a when you pull up to a gas station in order to get gas in your car, like how does that even, how is there even gas in there? Obviously there's a diesel truck
Sure.
or a truck that
Well,
puts gas
so
under the ground and you pump it in your car, but how does it even get there?
yeah, I'll go science nerd on you for a few minutes.
Please. Yeah.
So here's a cool thing about the United States. If you've never looked up geohistory, okay. And that is like the history of how the planets come together, subduction plates, all that kind of stuff that you see on a Planet Earth show or something like that. There used to be a massive ocean that went right up the center of the United States. And there were like mountains where California was. There were mountains over there on the East Coast. Everything in the middle was more or less underwater. It was a marine environment. So if you come down here to Texas and you're in Austin, you'll notice this white rock on the ground. That's called the Austin chalk. That is actually like tiny little forams, and there were little microscopic animals that lived in the ocean that died, sunk to the bottom. That became the sediment, which got compressed enough to become the rock. So this all used to be underwater. So you can find all kinds of cool fish and maritime related fossils throughout Texas.
Hmm.
What people don't realize is when those die, they have organic matter in them, right? The soft, squishy parts that we have, like we have. And so when you and I eat a plant or we eat something else like that and our body builds it into fat or energy, fat is a hydrocarbon. All it is a bunch of carbons and hydrogen linked in a chain. Our body breaks that down for energy by snapping those off in the process of, like, as we live, plants do it, through chloroform, but it's using that energy of breaking hydrogens in order to provide us energy to do other things. All that got buried and compressed. Well, over time, heat and pressure broke down the organic matter until it's smaller components. And so when you go to the gas station, for example, and you get gas, your gas is octane. Octane is a hydrocarbon chain that's 8 molecules long, hence oct. If it's if it's 6, it's hexane. If you get down to the smallest increment, that's methane. And methane is like literally 4 little hydrogens on a carbon. When you go take your science, I always tell people they know more science than they thought.
Mhm.
If you go and look in a science book and you start reading about oxidation, they'll always use methane as the example because it's the easiest example of showing how oxygen replaces that hydrogen and that energy sparked off. That's the thing. What it produces whenever you do that is it produces carbon dioxide and water vapor. And so that's why when we burn natural gas and it's a shorter chain, that's a cleaner fuel than if we burn something like diesel, which is a longer chain and it has more particulate matter that can link into it in the forms of nitrogen or other compounds. Now, the cool thing about it when we drill for wells is what we're looking for is a certain layer of rock. And the things that we need are like 4 main characteristics. We need to know that there's a reservoir there, which means there's the capacity to hold the liquid, that it's trapped in place, that it didn't migrate somewhere else over time.
Mhm.
And then what we have to do is gain access to it whenever we're drilling. The other thing is that rock that we're drilling into is fairly dense depending on what type of rock it is. So you're looking for things called porosity and permeability. Porosity is the capacity to hold a liquid. Permeability is the ability for the liquid to pass through it. And so,
Hmm.
like, the example I give is like if you look at bubble wrap has a lot of porosity, but it's not permeable. I can make a cup out of bubble wrap and drink out of it. By comparison, a sponge has a lot of porosity and it has permeability. Water can flow through it when I stick it underneath the tap. So
Gotcha.
we're looking for reservoirs that did that. And that's how oil and gas was for decades. We would look for sandstones or we would look for things like that that had a lot of porosity and permeability. We would drill to them. The heat and pressure that was down there is higher than what we have at the surface. Things under high pressure always seek areas of low pressure, so it would flow up pipe. And that's what we would take out. Every time we would drill through these areas that were shale. And shale is basically mudstone or silt stones. They're like
Hmm.
you find in the bottom of a lake or something like that. Over time, when you had these swamp areas, you would build up shale with a lot of organic material inside of it. And we knew there was oil inside of it, but the problem was oil and gas that inside a shell you couldn't access because it was very porous. And a lot of times it was even the rock that the oil came out of that went some sandstone or something like that. But it was not permeable. Shale is kind of like a stack of books. The pathways that you have there don't connect.
Hmm.
Okay, and so it's very laminar. Um, and so we would just bypass that in the 50s or whatever. They didn't know how to handle that. The first frack jobs, people talk about fracking. The first frack jobs actually happened back in the late 50s. They would do what's called a diesel frack, and they would use diesel as the fuel that they would use to break that rock up. And the way you're doing that is really, you're just putting hydraulic pressure to it, where you're increasing the pressure around that area to make the rock break. Because since it's stacked like this, it will break like that.
Hmm.
What changed, and what really changed around 2007, was a combination of two technologies together. And what you had was you had directional drilling, which is in the process of us drilling down. Most of the wells that we drill are more than a mile. The days of drilling shallower stuff are gone. All the low hanging fruit's been found in most cases. And so what happens is, as we're drilling down, we can put a motor on the end with just about a 2 degree. We have different sizes, but we can put the drill bit on the end with a different deviation, just a 2 degree tilt.
Hmm.
But if I'm drilling 2 degrees deviated over several hundred feet, it doesn't take long for that to turn. And so what we can do is take that and go down and at a 90-degree angle or other angles, depending on what's best services us, and we can find a zone in there and then drill into that zone. So in the old days, when they would drill a vertical well, if you had a zone that was 50 foot thick, when your well bore went through it and you had all your casing, which is the pipe that we put in the hole and cement into place before we produce the well, you would have 50 foot of area plus the circumference of the pipe is the total area that you could pull liquids into. Like that was your total contact with that zone. Now, because of the way horizontal drilling, if I have a 50-foot zone, I can drill down and land my well within that 50 foot and drill 3 miles. Now I have 3 miles
Wow.
times the circumference over the course of that. And that was huge. When we started doing that in the Barnett Shale, that's what dropped that gas price so low. All of a sudden, natural gas became super cheap. And America has enough natural gas based on our shale basins to run at current consumption for 250 years. And that's according to the
Wow.
USGS. And to be honest, those guys are pikers. They're not real good at calculating reservoirs like the companies are. But just for the numbers, we'll let the government have their fun with that, right? So once that kicked off and we were able to produce it, then once again, engineers, this is the age of the engineer. One of those guys figured out, well, wait a second, those frac jobs that we used to do in the 50s, we can do that here. So they would pressure the line down there and put so much hydraulic pressure by forcing water into it at high pressure that it would crack the rock. And so you would have these little fractures, almost like the thickness of a pencil lead, that would go out sometimes 800-900 feet. Well, now I've increased my surface area, not only in the horizontal well bore, but the oil can now travel through those cracks towards that. So now I've increased my surface area even more exponentially. The problem that we found is that at that pressure, once you create that crack, as soon as you take the pressure off of it, the cracks close back up. So that's where they came up with the idea of we're going to inject sand and a slurry down the hole. So when we push the water out, we push waves of sand out with it.
Hmm.
Sand is stronger than what shale is in terms of hardness. In fact, most sand is quartz sand, and quartz, if you look at the hardness of minerals, it's the hardest, most common thing that we have. Diamonds are at the top of the chart, but in terms of its like actual chemical structure, it's super hard. So when you drop that out there, it's like putting a shim underneath the door, keeps that door cracked open. And so now, whenever your fluids, you let the fluid release off and bring the flow back off the well, the oil is able to come in from broad area, the gas is able to come in broad area. What is ironic is most people think of oil and gas as, oh, those horrible wells. What they don't understand is like we've now changed the game so much that where if you used to in the 1930s, if you were going to drill up a square mile, they would put a well every, I don't know, they could do like 8, 9 wells. No, they do about 12 wells in the old school days per square mile. Nowadays, to get a whole square mile drilled, it's out there, so I'm not releasing anything new. But we actually have drilled wells where within that same square mile, we will go down, drill the well out, turn it, and drill it back. So with one well
Hmm.
bore, I'm now contacting over half of that square mile. I can drill that whole section 2 wells. Or if I have a whole bunch of sections, if I have 3 square miles in a row, I can drill 4 wells out 3 miles long, and I'm using up less space. I have less equipment on top. I have less risk of anything happening. It's safer. It's faster, but it is a little bit more expensive.
Hmm.
And so it's all about playing with those economies of scale of like what inflation is, how much our materials cost, how much the labor costs versus what the resource is to get that out. And we're, like I said, we got a lot of engineers that work for us. We're real good at it.
Yeah. What is, I know some of the complaints of shale was that in the injection process,
Right.
there's a lot to take in, and I'm a fucking idiot, so I was like trying to
No,
absorb
that's
that.
fine.
That's why I was like,
I am
typically
too.
people are probably just like, God, I've never seen him so quiet before. One of the things that's happened in the conversation is that the shale, the way that they pump water and sand, actually disrupts the bedrock and can cause earthquakes and all kinds of other issues.
Right. So that
Is
makes the
that
news,
accurate?
especially in Oklahoma, is where that's happened more places than anywhere else. And
Okay.
what it is it's not actually from fracking, it's from injection wells, which are two different things. So, for example, think back to what I was saying about everything being an ocean back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. When all that rock was there and it settled on the ground, there's water in there too. And
Mm-hmm.
so more silt and sediment build up over time. But when we go in and we drill an oil well or gas well, there's water that comes out. And not only is it water, but the ocean was a lot saltier back then. So it's super saline. So this is not water that we want to mix with our water table. And so what we have to do is we have to control that water. And that produced water has to be disposed of. And for the most part, with disposed water, what they'll do is they'll drill what's called an injection well. You will literally find a deep reservoir that doesn't have any oil and gas in it, normally from a well that was drilled previously.
Mm-hmm.
You will set it up so it can handle higher pressures, and then we'll take that super saline water and just inject it back into the ground into another reservoir.
Got it.
What they found is that some of these injection zones, especially in places like Oklahoma, where it's more geologically complex and there's a lot more faults, that when they were injecting these, if they didn't know that the faults there had enough pressure or whatever, that the pressure that they put in water basically lubricated that fault and allowed it to move. And so here's the weird thing. Like if you go on the USGS's website, they have an earthquake tracker. We're
Mm-hmm.
having earthquakes all the time, like
Yeah.
every day. They're small. We barely notice them. In
Yeah.
some cases, they're unnoticeable. We're having all the time because the Earth's dynamic and moving. In fact, here's a fun fact for people. Right now, the United States is moving towards Japan at a screaming 15 inches per year. Just because of subduction underneath the plates in California, in a couple million years, we will slam up against Japan.
Holy shit.
So,
That's wild.
we're going to have to wait around quite a time for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna happen in our lifetimes.
Right.
At
Not in our
least I hope
lifetimes.
not. If it happens in our
But
lifetime, something
geologically,
else
that's
is.
where we're moving. Just
Yeah,
like California will continue to slide down towards South America, right? It's because that fault in California is a slit fault, moves sideways.
that's what is that what they call the hot gates or the
Um,
or
I
what's
think
the
that
hot?
if I remember, I want to say that's the Nazca plate, and that's the
Yeah,
San
what's the
Andreas fault.
maybe not hot gates? What's the
So,
San
the Ring
Andreas
of
fault?
Fire.
Yeah, Ring of
Yes.
Fire. Where the hell are
Yeah,
hot
because
gates?
what you have like in the center of the ocean
Yeah.
is you have a rift zone that's creating new Earth, and as it pushes out, that has heavier minerals in it than the
Mm-hmm.
plate that we're on. And so when those two things meet, when two things are pushing each other in opposing force, something's got to give. So it'll either go under or it'll go over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because these are lighter, they slide up, and all of the subduction plates along the coast are
Mm-hmm.
where the heavier rock goes under, and then it melts up again down underneath.
So basically, in another million years, Pangea
Yeah.
will re-exist. Everything's separated, and then it's all going to come
Right.
back together into one continent.
Oh yeah, and it's real fun if you ever want to fall down that rabbit hole. There's some great videos on YouTube about how the plates have changed over time, because the United States used to be right up against England. And the funny thing is, the guy who figured this out way back in the day, he was actually a climate scientist that he would do these exploration deals up at the North Pole. And so he would go up there. He's frozen in, landlocked, can't get anywhere, observing the weather in the North Pole. So he had nothing to do but sit around and think. And he'd look at his globe and he was like, it looks like you could take South America and Africa and just stick those two together.
Yep.
And that was kind of his idea. So he started doing research on it, and he found there are plants that are common to both places. There are fossils that are common to both places. at some point those things touch. The rocks are even the comparative ages. And he was like, dude, this is my theory. So he comes back off one of his missions. He's got all his books with him that he's taken in research. He presents his findings. Everybody's like, that's really cool. And he's like, yeah, I'm working on some more stuff. Goes back to North Pole, never heard from again. Like, we don't know, froze to death, died.
No, really?
Yeah, it was way back in the day. But yeah,
he went to the North Pole and was never heard from again?
Because he was a climate scientist and that's what he would do.
Oh man, that is crazy. Yeah, there's like really wild stuff, and was it Graham Hancock was talking about this? They found Australasian DNA in the Amazon.
Yeah,
and it's like how the what? And it's like those two like way before we had what we thought was naval travel. Like there's some really Randall Carlson has done a lot with this, and also Dr. Robert Schoch, who is a geologist as well, has dated the Sphinx to say it's probably 30,000 years older than we think it is, which has caused a whole other uproar. And there's probably another episode.
I love the science stuff and I love the history of it. Another fun one for you is there's a book called The Map That Changed the World, and it's about the guy who's considered the father of geology. What's funny is we've lived on this planet for millions of years. No one ever thought to study it until late. So we had chemistry, we had physics, we had mathematics, all these things. And there's this guy who's literally a canal digger in England. His job is to dig canals for them to move the coal around, stuff like that. And as he's in the process of doing this work, he notices that the ground, as he's digging these canals, changes in different places. So he just starts making a map of it. Oh, I have these kind of rocks here. I have this kind of rock here. Oh, it's this kind of rock here. Because that's his job, right? When he goes to his friend that he's talking to at the House of Lords, they're drinking around, hanging out. And this guy's part of the Science Society there. And they're hanging out. And he was like, oh, yeah, I got this map that I made showing like that the Earth is different in different places. Well, this guy, being an educated scientist, goes, oh, crap. He realized you just created an entirely different science. Like nobody else has done this. So he steals the idea and publishes it as his own. Has the other guy committed and put into prison saying that he owes him money and that he's crazy. And like literally that guy fights, his name is Alfred Wegener, fights his whole life to get out, finally gets out. But like they never gave him credit for it until after his death. That they found out that the other guy stole it from him.
That's excruciating.
But it's one of those deals where it's just observational science. And the guy was a genius to recognize those patterns and put it together.
And he's stolen, and his life was ruined for it. Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah,
we've had a problem with shitty people for a long time. It seem like a lot of them are in politics these days. But
there is no lack of shitty people.
No, there's not. I wish there was. That's like I've had this conversation a lot where it's like and even like stuff like this, it's like you can't even have a civil conversation in certain capacities because there's so much special interest around because it's just somebody else's like narcissist want. So they're like, I don't want this information getting out.
I think a big part of that too is it's just we got to get out of that tribal nature of rooting for the laundry, of rooting for your team. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, they put their identity into their team and they're not honest with themselves. And like, I'll use this as a comparison. Like I'm a Dallas Stars fan for hockey, right? There's a player that I absolutely hated, which was Eric Lindros. But the Stars got Lindros for a while. We had him for like, a half a season or whatever. And so people still cheered for Lindros. I still hated that guy. I didn't like him, and it's like, why do I want to root for him? Or Terrell Owens for the Cowboys. Same kind of deal. And people will root for the laundry. It's like you hate the guy and you'll still root for the side. And I think my thing is I just prefer to be intellectually honest, and if someone's a good person, they're a good person. If they're not, they're not. And I don't think either party has all the answers because it's obvious that they get things wrong all the time. And every politician I've ever voted for has disappointed me somewhere, and it's the nature of it. But I do try to constantly steer my vote towards the person that is going to be, or at least shown the propensity to be, a steward. I actually feel like, for example, Rand Paul that you brought, I think Rand Paul is a steward. I think he
seems to be. I think he seems like he's a decent guy. I know he was. He wound up on a list of people that profited pretty well from like the congressperson thing. So he's not like he's on.
I don't think any of them are clean. I think none of them would survive a really good audit.
No, that's the thing. I know it's like the Federal Reserve and all of our politicians would be so boned if we did an audit. And that was actually like Jon Stewart just interviewed I'm blanking on her name, but it was about the Pentagon budget and
Oh,
about the audit. And it's just like, to insist there's no waste, fraud, or abuse in a budget that big is it's just asinine. Actually, we
yeah.
had a great conversation. Alderman Raymond Lopez from the 15th Ward here in Chicago. Shout out to Ray Lopez. The guy's fucking awesome. Really sharp guy. Again, it's just like government person that understands government is slow and you have to partner with the private sector who is fast. Private sector will cut corners if you allow them to. So they need the government there to prevent them from making and doing dumb shit.
Right.
So there's this relationship that we need to have with one another. And it's the binary values that I always talk about that where I think we go off the rails. And it's like, we actually need each other. The left needs the right and vice versa. You need the crazy artist with the guy who's like, too stodgy and won't break out of his ways. Like we need each other in a really big way. What we don't need are people that are taking advantage of us and trying to convince us that we are each other's enemies and that the real other in this world is not your neighbor. That's the person you're supposed to love and take care of, the person to the left and right of you. The real other in our society, when you talk about othering people, are the people that are running the show above us who aren't doing a very good job. And I keep coming back to that because things have gone so far off the rails.
Right. And I think that shows like this and anytime we can get people to engage and look at the world around them, not the Facebook controlled world, but just some observation, like it's fine to read the media, but don't read one media source. Like that's the one thing I learned with the hedge fund. With the hedge fund, like for example, I watch so much CNBC, it's ridiculous because it's business news and they can only afford to BS you so much. But even then I'll watch a Fox Business or I'll watch a Bloomberg as well. I'll go read things like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, but then I'll also go read things like New Times of India. Sometimes go ahead and read what the Chinese state news is saying. It's propaganda, but at least you see the narrative that they're pushing. Australia has a bunch of really good newspapers as well. And it's amazing the stuff you can learn about the United States when you see what the English are saying about us or the Germans are saying about us.
Yes, that's something that, a lot of people do not or are not aware of news sources outside of the United States. And again, if you're getting, I hate to break it to anyone listening or watching, but if you're getting your news from your television set in one of any of the major news stations, it's narrative, it's propaganda. You're not getting the news. But people just aren't. And again, case in point, the Pentagon leak that we were talking about earlier, there is not a single news station that is covering this for what it is, which is that the administration for why we got into the war with why we're in a proxy war. That whole story, the whole thing is complete bullshit. We have United States troops on the ground in the Ukraine. That should not be. We were not told that we did that. That is a circumvention of presidential power. You have to go through the Congress for this. You need a warning order signed by the President of the United States. If you're good, this is so fucked.
There is a limitation on time after the president sends someone before they have to report to Congress.
Absolutely. And you also we're talking about two nuclear superpowers. This is not, and again, this is, I think the deep, like the insider permanent Washington, like they play so fast and loose with this shit, and they've been doing it for years that it's like, oh yeah, we'll just do the same. We'll just run the same playbook here as well. And it's like there's evidence that we helped destabilize the government in 2014. We pushed Putin to a place, and I'm not some like Putin fan. That's not what I'm saying. And again, this gets to a place of not holding binary values. Like you can understand why someone does something and also not support the person. But it's like we fucked with that guy for a long time.
Sure.
And we put missiles in Poland. We violated a NATO treaty over and over and over. We kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Yeah. This is kind of like chickens coming home to roost here. And this concept that it's like this information can't make it to the American public. It's like, well, that is so dangerous. And then you see stuff like the Bud Light thing with Dylan Mulvaney. People are so pissed about that. And I get frustrated because I'm like, dude, who gives a shit? Like, it's a beer. Pay attention.
It's poured water. Move on.
Yeah, and it who cares? But it's like the real problems here in this world that are like legitimate problems. The abuse of AI that's growing in ways that are completely uncontrolled.
That is frightening.
the bill they just tried to pass, the anti-TikTok bill, which is just a complete clawback of any First Amendment rights, is really what that is. And you can tell because the scumbag Republicans that backed it, like Dan Crenshaw, unfortunately, in Texas. But it's like this, you find out who the assholes are in either party, figure out what they're pushing, and then that's the thing you should probably be concerned about. Not, some media gaffe from a company that's actually owned overseas. Isn't Anheuser-Busch like a Swedish company?
They're Belgian, if I remember right.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not whatever. And it's like this that makes media outrage because of like the, Kid Rock shooting up a bunch of Bud Light cans.
Well, it's clickbait. It's clickbait. Nobody likes the story with the nice, boring things. Like, nobody watches Sunday morning network television news,
Well, and not to contradict what I was saying earlier too, because it's like you vote with your dollars, and it's like the things that you can control them. So if it just flies in the face of your values, then don't buy the product anymore. Fine. But it's like at the same time that you're going to get outraged over that, get outraged over shit that's trying to get passed that like really needs to have a lens over it. Like Tulsi Gabbard did a whole thing on this anti-TikTok bill. Like that's frightening that there's Republicans. Lindsey Graham was like, I endorsed it. He didn't even read the bill. Like these people are fucking us so badly because they are lazy and they're not doing their jobs. They've held public office for, I don't know, 7,000 years, however long they've all been there. And they're not upholding this. So they get their staffers that bring something. The staffers are probably telling them something different than what is actually in the bill. Sure. They sign off on it and then it gets passed. Like that is the thing. If you want to get outraged, get outraged over that. Like that's the stuff that we should be focused on. Because
so here's to that end, and here's a funny point. I have actually influenced and altered some of the United States foreign policy in my life.
No shit.
When I worked for Boone and we were doing the Pickens plan and all the Republicans were running and it was coming in that time frame that Trump was going to throw his hat in the ring, we had a phone call where he called Boone, and Boone would make that phone call with all the people that are analysts in the room, right? And one of the things that he had me studying before that, so he could put it out to various senators and House reps that would come in, we talked about the Pickens plan, is what is China doing in energy? Because like I said, China is very resource poor. They need oil and gas. So whenever the Gulf War was ending, the first 13 contracts that got signed in Iraq went to China. China was the first one to come in and say, hey, we'll fix your refinery. Hey, we'll fix this field. Wow. Hey, we'll come in and do that. We fight the war, pay for the war. Our people die for the war. China gets the oil.
That's
right. Here's another one. We have 13 carriers in the United States. China, most of the stuff that it gets from the Middle East, it has to bring around the southern part of India through this little tight part, right? We constantly have at least 3 carriers on a rotation to protect the Straits of Hormuz right between Iran and Saudi Arabia, because those two hate each other, right? Just letting them know, hey, fuck around and find out. Constantly. So we're spending our time, effort, money, endangering our people to watch that oil that comes through there. And 80% of that goes to China. It doesn't come to us.
Dude,
it goes
crazy.
To them. So it's like, why are we being the world's policemen and protecting everybody else's stuff? Why are we risking our people's lives? Why do we have a generation that has to go fight the wars that have been honestly going on for ages with countries that we destabilize, in Iran's case, and then China gets the benefit of it. That's asinine. And so when we presented that stuff to Trump, he was shocked. And the thing that he took away from that, the biggest part, was he's like, wait. We did all the work and China gets the deals? And he was like, yeah. And he goes, like, that oil should go to us. And I said, we should at least have an option on it. Yeah. We should at least have a first right of refusal. Hey, we freed your country. At least let a U.S. company come in and pick up that contract or something.
Wasn't that the talking point, the shouting talking point when I got back from the Middle East? Was that
people would say no blood for oil, died. Right?
It was a war for oil, and I'm like, I don't think
that Halliburton was the one that's going to make all the cash. It was like, no, actually, it was CNNOC. It was China's oil companies. They're the ones that got the benefit of that oil.
Dude, that's crazy. I don't think anyone knows that. That's like so when it.
And the irony is, if you want to go do research, it's all out there. It's not hard to find. They'll tell you about it in the news. You just have to take the time to go learn it and have a reason or motivation to do that. And that's where educating people, like getting them to pick their head up out of what's going on in Facebook and instead look at stuff like that. Then when it comes time to vote, you can make a decision of like, I don't want to vote for that official because this is the same guy that's willing to commit our troops for something that's not beneficial to us, where we really don't have an axe to grind. Like,
Yeah.
I get that the United States loves getting to test all their new missile weapon systems and things like that over in the Ukraine because, dude, that's incredible work for the military companies, and that we burn through, all these shoulder launched missiles that we have, and that Raytheon stock is now over 100. Great,
Yeah. Well, we
but
burn through all our own stock. Our old stuff goes overseas so we can make new stuff. That's the
yeah,
dirty
and so
secret
now
there.
what happens? We burn off half our Stinger missiles. Well, what do we need now? We need more Stinger missiles.
Need more missiles. Well, we need the new
Yeah,
ones, the better ones.
that's right. But I want to go back to reminding you, we're the bad guys because we have big signs next to the road that tell you how much it costs.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh man, that's such a good point. Yeah,
It
this
is.
is again, this gets into everything that this show's about is disrupting narrative, man. It's like there's such a clear narrative that like, oh, people are like constantly told it's like, here are the enemies. Here's your silver platter with the enemies that we've identified for you. This
Yeah.
is the problem with censorship and treating people like they're stupid. Eventually you'll make them so. If you don't give people the information, let them think for themselves, they're never going to realize that. I don't know a single person that with the information you told us about China getting those contracts for oil, I don't know a single person that would have had that information. Not one. And I know some very plugged in, like political people, very plugged in people that I'm actually hoping to get on the show. I don't think anyone knows that. And I can't wait to ask them because that is such a nugget of information. And that's also why it's like, again, it's like the access for certain people, but not for you. That's so bananas that we gave that money to China, which is our
Well,
enemy.
I'll throw you a fun one too. You had mentioned that you're talking about moving down here to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You will be moving to the state that produces the most green energy. Did you know that?
No shit, really?
Oh, we smoke everybody. In fact, we smoke the next three people behind us combined.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Texas put, like last year, for example, we put 7,500 megawatts worth of projects online. California's closest to us with 2,600 megawatts. Yeah,
Wow.
we absolutely dominate the dojo in green energy. And it's
That
not even
is
close. And the reason for it is because in Texas with oil and gas, we don't quite have the same NIMBY mindset of not in my backyard. That like you try to put a wind farm off the end of, Massachusetts or something. Oh my gosh, they're going to freak out. You can't have that. They mess up the sideline.
Yeah,
Or
you're not going to.
it might kill the airbirds. And I'm like, well, yeah, you know what? It does. Wind farms actually do kill a lot of birds. And you know what they found to fix that? Paint them. If you paint them, the birds can see them. It's not that hard. Don't leave them white.
Really?
Yeah.
But they don't. But it's an eyesore. Then you don't want a bunch of yellow or orange.
Well, you don't want eyesores, or do you want to sit in the dark?
Well,
you want clean energy. There's a cost.
Again, it's such a funny. This is always like why I brought the G20 earlier. It's like there's this thing of like I care so much about this thing, and then behind closed doors, it's like they don't fucking care at all. They're just doing something else completely.
Right.
And it's that same mentality. It's like, oh, we care about the environment. We care so much. It's like, we'll put a wind turbine in your backyard. Like, no, it's going to fuck up my view of the ocean. It's like,
yeah, I don't want that. I don't want to mess up my view. Well,
you don't want to mess
I
up
will
my
say
view.
this, back to that happy warrior concept I was talking about. Here's some good news. I'm going to share some good news with you. There have been big developments, not in fusion, but in fission. And so we are moving closer to being able to produce energy with fission. And if we can do that, you don't have the same radioactive waste that we have with nuclear now. And so that is going to be a massive game changer if we can get that going. Now, I will say, is the United States, what we need to focus on in that interim time is we need to build more electrical lines. We need to update the grid. And the irony was the Democrats passed this huge package of infrastructure stuff and then are not doing enough to fix our actual infrastructure on the electrical side. Like, I get they want to push everybody to electric cars, but it's not going to matter if we don't have the grid that can support switching those energy sources around whenever they're in demand.
Well,
and
there's that, and then also the rare earth minerals to go 100% electric.
Yeah.
I don't think that's even. From every report that I've seen on this and every conversation I've had, declaratively, we do not possess the rare earth minerals to make the batteries that we need for electric cars in the current capacity. We don't have the lithium mines. We don't have the cobalt. Cobalt is basically all mined through very inexpensive, grotesque human labor, child labor. And so there's that piece of it. And again, it's like this gets into, we don't have the infrastructure for a full electric grid. Well, where do you think if you plug your electric car in, how's it getting power? It's from coal, dummy. So it's like, so, all right, so now you're back to square one. So you might
Yeah.
feel really good about your electric car, but if we don't have the infrastructure for it and we don't have the green energy to support it, that has to come from something. So
Yeah.
it's just, again, this gets into this virtue signaling bullshit. That's like,
And,
do we want to solve these problems, or do we just want to feel like we're good people? Because
right. And I think that's a cool part of it as well, in the sense that, like, if we could separate that part out, if we could get people over that emotional hump, the dopamine hit of like, I feel good about myself. There's a lot of things to like about electrical vehicles. Like, engineering standpoint, the amount of torque that comes from an electric engine
they're pretty
as
cool.
opposed to an internal combustion engine, and how that's transferred. Like, I love that technology. That's great. And I think we continue to push that. And there's no real silver bullet answer, but I think that there is a silver shotgun shell of multiple things that we can put towards the energy space that will continue to move us forward. The main thing that I always try to tell people is accept the reality of right now, of where we're at right now. Like, it's fine to look for where you want to go, but let's take the step that we can take today to get towards that place. And don't hinder the people that are alive today. Or at least don't try to handicap the people that are alive today, just struggling to make ends meet and to just live in third world countries, when we can drag them forward as we make this progress.
Well, that gets into, and I've talked about this before, I may have said it earlier too. It's like we keep addressing these problems in silos. So this is always I always had this conversation with a buddy of mine where it's like, crime disproportionately impacts low income communities, or climate, or energy costs, or inflation. Choose a topic right now in the zeitgeist of political discourse. In that political discourse, it's like everything always seems to come back to this narrative of that it's impacting low income communities and it's hurting those people the most. So it's like, if we really care about these people, then maybe we should get them out of poverty, and that should be the move. Because, and it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do you really expect anybody to give a shit about the climate if they are trying to figure out how to heat their house and put food on the table? Like, are you?
Yeah, I will say this. I have no doubt that it is hard to be a minority in any country, including the United States, in any country at all. But it's a whole lot easier to be one that's not poor.
Yeah, it's
across the board.
Life's a lot easier when you have money. I will tell you that. I've been flat broke in my life, and I've had money, and I will always choose to have money over the other.
I grew up in a family that was pretty broke. I have eaten my Cheerios with water before. I know what that's like. It sucks. I'm not there now, and I can tell you it's a whole lot better. Yeah. And I love to see people do well, because it's not a zero-sum game when other people are doing well. That's beneficial, because then their concerns turn to things like the environment or things like that, when you're not worried about where your next meal is going to be.
Yeah, and again, this gets like a rising tide lifts all boats. So this is my issues with capitalism, and like late stage capitalism, and it's like there's an abusiveness that this system has, and it's all through corruption. So I should say, maybe not late stage capitalism is my issue. We have, and I've said this in a interview with William Kelly, who's a reporter here in Chicago, that we have a people problem. That regardless of what is systems, guns, whatever, choose whatever topic you want to talk about. It doesn't matter, like left or right. There's always a shouting talking point on either side. Really what it comes down to is just like shitty people doing shitty things. Like the guy you brought up earlier who invented geology, who stole somebody else's work and then had him jailed for it. That's crazy. Like this isn't a new problem. And I think as we've lost like a spirituality in this country, and I'm not talking about religion in particular, or anyone's religion in particular. I'm just saying, like, in general, we've put, and I think there's some really great lessons to come from religious texts of all kinds, that once you lose sight of the human element, where I was talking earlier about loving your neighbor and actually caring for the world around you, if it's just about money, power, or control, if that's the only thing that matters to you in this material world, and there's nothing else of other great import, then what else do you have? It's like the only thing that was
very nihilistic, and all you chase is comfort.
Right. Well, but it becomes worse than that, because, and especially this is when I talk about and shit on our politicians who are so terrible. If the only thing you care about is power, money, and control, then the only thing better than power, money, and control is more power, more money, and more control.
Right.
And the only thing better than more power, more money, and more control is even more money, even more power, and even more control. It's a never ending cycle. You can never have enough, because you've lost sight of the bigger problem, which is that people around you are suffering for your excessive gain. remains. And I don't begrudge people's success, and I certainly don't want to take money from somebody that's honestly made it. But at the same token, there is a world around us that is suffering. And as I've gotten older, it seems like it's getting worse.
Yeah.
And there's only so much that one person can do. And again, you look at, we sent, I don't know how many billions of aid of US dollars to the Ukraine. I just saw a report. The CIA itself is very much aware that over $400 million of that was embezzled by either Zelensky or his generals. That is a fucking ton of money. That is it's absolutely inexcusable. It's disgusting. $400 million could fix every single problem here in Chicago, I would imagine, especially within the school systems, giving people economic ladders out of poverty, being able to start small businesses. That is disgusting and despicable, and there's no recourse whatsoever for the American public.
There never is.
This is the shit that I talk about where I'm like, get mad about not the fucking idiot, the attention whore on the Budweiser can. Get mad about the stuff that like that, where they're stealing money from you, the people, and sending it overseas to corrupt dictatorships. That's the guy. Zelensky has shut down churches. He's shut down free speech. He's jailed political opposition. This guy is not pro-democracy.
Oh no, he's not a good person.
No, not at all. And this is coming to light. And people have been talking about this for a long time. Like this is a problem. This is a major,
I will say this:
problem.
If you're Russian, right? If you're Russian and you're trying to get your produced gas into Europe, and you need to move that, right? That Nord Stream pipeline going down really hurt you.
Yep.
But all of a sudden, all that gas that's in Russia now goes through the Ukraine. A bunch of it does. Where Biden's son happened to have been part of that pipeline company.
Oh, wow.
Not an accident, probably.
God. That's enough. I mean, dude, I could do 5 hours on that.
And he's not the first one. He's not the only one. You can point through lots of other presidents or lots of other politicians who've done something similar. It's amazing how their plans somehow seem to align with their wallets because there is no stewardship and they're not held to account.
That's amazing. Yeah. And this, again, it's like Dave Smith, who's a stand-up comic, and he has a podcast called Part of the Problem. It's a great podcast. If you're ever looking for another one. He's talked about this a couple times where there has to be like the political will to go after the politicians.
Yeah.
And it's like, is there a political will to go after these individuals? And it's like, it seems like the answer declaratively is no. And I'm starting to see a very clear pattern of like anything that they're doing. And it's again, I don't even like Trump that much, but I find and this is why I'm so pissed at the Democrats right now. I find myself defending him on a regular basis because of the unbelievable double standard that exists in the Democratic Party right now.
I will say I love the law of unintended consequences in politics. And I love the way the expression of personality shows up in the parties in the sense that there's a lot of emotional satisfaction that's desired by the Democratic base. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to long-term planning. And yet there's a lot of long-term planning that doesn't understand the emotions on the Republican side. And you saw this happen like with the Supreme Court picks when you had Andy Reid say, we're just going to nuke the filibuster on this and we're going to push Obama's people through. Mm-hmm. And when they did, they said, hey, if you do this, then all bets are off. And Andy Reid's like, elections have consequences. Doesn't matter. You guys deal with it. Too bad. Well, then what happens? Trump gets in and through hook or through crook ends up pointing three. Mm-hmm. And the Democrats are suddenly like, wait, that's not fair. And they're like, no, you guys broke the seal on that. That sixth seal got broken. And I don't mind to say, I know it's political. Some of the stuff they're doing with the brag thing where they're chasing Trump. Like, I get that. But I'm telling you, they don't realize they are breaking another seal.
The boomerang effect.
If you go after a president, then it's now fair game. Like, nobody's going to hold back on you. These rules that you guys, where you were supposedly friends and you didn't call each other liars and stuff like that. Like, as you degrade those, that's green light for game on, and both sides are going to do it. And for me, sitting in the backseat where I got no dog in this fight and I don't get a say, I just know this. I'm actually ready to see a couple of politicians go to jail. Because they break laws all the time that you and I would go to jail
all the time. Well, I'd
like to see a little accountability.
Yeah, and we need it because the system's worth saving. You have to use the system that's in place because the system that's in place is worth saving.
Well, we can't incentivize them to act like you don't have to have good politicians if you can incentivize bad politicians to do good things.
Yeah. That's
right.
Valid
Because
point.
we're not going to find anybody that's a saint to be a politician. And like everybody that I know that's really competent that I would love to have as a leader has no desire whatsoever to be a political leader.
No,
And
they're
like
never going
not
to
at
touch
all.
it.
Like my wife asked me one time, would you think about running politics? Hell no.
No.
Double hell no. I'm not doing that. I'm not putting my family through that crap. I actually like to fix things. I like to see stuff get done.
Yeah, that's the purpose of this. I'm seeing so the indictment of Trump as well as the Mar-a-Lago raid, and looking at the leaked emails that came out after the fact. The White House was very much aware that was going to happen, and in fact, looks like they actually okayed it and pushed for it. The way I'm seeing this is that this is a political move. It's actually a brilliant chess move that you indict Trump so that way. When they go after Biden, because there is a mountain of evidence, and they're probably going to have. There's so much evidence that came out of the House Financial Committee that investigated him, Hunter, the sister, the brother.
They're like 9 family members, I think that they said.
It's really remarkable.
Yeah,
like it's an embarrassment of riches because of how much information they have and evidence they have. This will happen at some point, but now that Trump has been indicted, the machine and the media can then come out and say, "Oh, this is retaliation for indicting Trump."
Well, and on top of that,
they had to indict
how they
Trump.
can fix not really wanting Biden to run again.
There's that too. It's
you
the same thing that happened,
and then you're like, "Oh, well, we got to have Gavin Newsom."
Yeah, and good luck with that.
I think that's who they want to queue up, at least on the progressive side.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Democrats handle Biden and the Kamala Harris situation. And again, we saw this with the Mar-a-Lago raid. It's like, oh my God, they raided Trump's home. He has secret documents. And then what happened shortly after that? Biden has documents. Pence has documents. Shit that they shouldn't. And Biden has classified documents that, by the way, he was not president when he got those documents. He was a vice president and he was a senator. So
and he had him at the Penn Senator at his Penn. Penn State thing that he had I forget his little college or whatever, which by the way, that stuff went in there and China also gave a bunch of money to that college.
Yeah. Surprise. Well, the other place he had documents was in a lockup in Chinatown, and no one knows who had access to what the key was there. I mean,
I'm sure it's very secure.
Was that dropped off just so somebody from the CCP could walk in and scan documents? We don't even know what the documents are because this isn't being investigated because it's being swept under the rug because censorship sucks. This is the problem with censorship. It's like,
and the problem is you dump one of those guys' dirt out in the lawn and you have to worry about him turning and dumping everybody else's dirt out on the lawn, so they won't do it.
Well, I think this is, when you really look into where we are, I think this is the reason that nothing has come to light, is because I think the system is so broken. It's so corrupt at every level, including the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, the executive branch, both parties, senators, congressmen, you name it, judicial system. I think the corruption is so systemic that if you pull the thread on the sweater, the whole damn thing will unravel. And I think this is actually the reason that we're not seeing accountability. We're not seeing anybody arrested, is because as soon as somebody gets smoked, they're going to come after the entire system. Yeah. And that's the crazy part.
As soon as Epstein's list comes out,
that's why that's never going to get dropped. Yeah. Oh, that's why he got smoked. Everybody's getting
rolled.
Yeah. You can't have that guy. Yeah. No, you can't have that guy testify.
The only part of that really frightens me, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with, I don't mind if the media colludes against the people, because they kind of do that. They still need us though, because all we have to do is not watch their stuff and they disappear. Ask BuzzFeed how that worked, Yeah.
And
so I'm just saying, CNN Plus,
that was the fucking dumbest thing ever.
Nobody's watching it to begin with.
That was so insane. That's a perfect example of a room full of yes men saying that, we just agreeing with the boss rather than being like, we don't even have the viewership for this shit. And actually my decade plus of travel over maybe, 2 now, I remember very distinctly every time I was in the airport, you'd see CNN on every single television in the damn airport. And I was like, are these counting towards their ratings? Is it? Because I was always wondering.
Kind of wondered. It might have.
Yeah. It's like, are they just being flooded with an extra, I don't know how many million ratings, because they're all in every single, TV and like hotels and in
it's like the rating houses for stocks and bonds and stuff. Oh, this is an A+. This is a AA+. Well, why is it a AA+? Well, we said it's a AA+.
Because it's a AA+. Don't ask any
Oh,
questions.
okay. Well, there you go. Appreciate that.
It's a wild time, man. You're also an author.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that too. I don't want to go so far off the rails here. This is a great conversation. I really appreciate you doing this, but I want to talk
Oh, no
about, you have a
problem.
couple books.
Yep.
They're out. Are they themed? Are they,
Yeah. So what I did is because I'm a big nerd and I fully acknowledge my nerddom, I played D&D back in the days when you had to be a devil worshiper to do it, supposedly, which is
oh,
which
those,
is a good job
yeah.
for me as a Southern Baptist to still be a devil worshiping D&D player, listens to heavy metal, Um, but when COVID hit, I had a bunch of guys that I played D&D with on the regular, and especially at the beginning, when nobody knew how bad anything was going to be, and it was, the end of the world as we know it. I stole that from REM, sorry. But when that happened, I had this idea for a game, and I had people tell me before, you should write a book. And, you'd be a great author. You should write a book. You're so creative, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, I got all the spare time I need, and why not? And so I wrote a book. And that is my first book, which is called The Stars at Night. It's spelled with a K, and night
Okay.
is. And it's on Amazon. That's the only, I think that one is actually, you can get through a couple of the other ones, but for the most part, it's just self-published through Amazon. Traditional publishing takes forever, and they're looking for specific things that they can market. And there's different things in the market that they're trying to fill that gap at any given time. And I'm not that guy.
Yep.
So I was like, forget waiting on traditional publishing. So
Well,
I
didn't
went
you
ahead
say
and
it was like a year and a half plus of like sometimes, yeah.
if they like you, first, if you query them, you send them, hey, here's my idea for a book. They may respond to you within a month, sometimes, if at all, or not. And then even if they do like you, then it's like, okay, submit your stuff to us, give us your document. And then even then it's going to take a year and a half to get done. So like how they pick
So
what's going to be in the market is more like wish casting what they want to be in the market. Because you tell me what's the market for anything right now, a year and a half from now.
Yeah, that's where my head was. It's like by the
Yeah.
time you get something out into the world, you're so far past it. I mean, if it caught its storm and then you're like, hey, can you do an interview with us over this book? And you're like, shit, I wrote it forever ago. I don't remember what it was about.
So at any rate, I decided the self-publishing route was when I went. And so I kind of learned on the fly how to do that process. And there's some work to it. There's a lot of people out there that will love to make money off you if you don't know how to do it, that will sell you their magic snake oil to make all your stuff work. And so for any aspiring authors out there, be prepared for that. And like, I wasn't writing it to be rich or anything. So like I make some money off of them, but I'm not quitting my day job or anything, but it was fun for me to tell those stories and then to put them out. And then what's been neat is like, I wanted to continue that story. So my first book, The Stars at Night, is about Texas folklore. And it's kind of along the same vein as the TV show Supernatural. And it follows like, what if these supernatural things were around in the world today? And I fell in love with the characters that I wrote. I had a good time doing it. So I actually wrote a whole series out of that. And there's 4 books in that. Those all 4 are out there. So if somebody wants to read them, they're there. It's on Kindle. I actually did audiobooks because I was interested in the media. So there's a wonderful guy that I met through, I think I did him through Audible, that he recorded all those for me. So that was a cool process to learn.
Oh, you didn't read them?
No, he read them, but I mean, like I didn't want to read them myself. I wanted to get someone else to do it.
Got it. Okay.
And so, because like I don't have the recording apparatus and I don't know the sound engineering audio stuff like he does. He's much better at it than me. And so he took care of those. So like that was a fun process. And then once I got done with that series, I thought, I want to go ahead and write something different now. So I wrote something that's near future sci-fi. It's kind of a locked room murder. And the name of that book is Gray File. It's on Amazon as well. And it has some political elements in it. It has, because this guy it's in the future where the FBI has been rent off because basically tell me if this fits. They were manipulating the data and the things that they could track about us so much so that people didn't trust the government anymore. So they ditched them. And then our politicians changed the 4th Amendment so that when searches are done by our law enforcement, the judiciary sits over their shoulder and makes sure that they don't go and search down other rabbit holes while they're chasing one guy. That's the general premise of it.
Sounds very realistic.
Right now I have my second book, which is the final one to that. So that's just going to be a 2-book series, which is going to be called Gray Betrayal. And I'll release that hopefully in May. I'm hoping, because I got to get through all my edits, and like I send it out to beta readers. They read it and give me notes back, and then I make changes in there. And I actually got my last notes yesterday.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
but that one has a lot more to do with AI and stuff like that. Once again, AI and geopolitics, and nothing that's timely, you know. But it's all
Not
fictional, and but
nothing
I
that we're
enjoy
talking
doing
about right
them.
now.
It's
That's great,
fun.
man. So
It keeps
you've
me out
got
of the pool hall.
yeah, you've got you've got six. So you have 6 books in total.
Yeah, 6 total.
That's all from 2 different series. And what was
Yeah,
the?
the sixth one hasn't been published yet, and then I'm actually, because I was waiting on my notes, I started working on another one that's a fantasy book. So I'll
Okay,
probably crank that out. I think right now my intention is to make that like a 3-book series.
that's very cool, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, that we need great storytellers in this world that can tie the types of stuff that we're talking about to something analogous to help teach people,
yeah,
help educate people. There's always an interesting way. Art is so important.
it
This
is.
is actually, yeah, I really, this is part of my reason I've been so upset with a lot of film and television and artists in general, people within entertainment, is because they seem to all be captured by the same thought, and that's not what made art. It's what's the fucking point? If it's all the same thing, then what's unique about it? Like the individuality is so, that's the thing, that's the spark of the individual that's so unique, that
Right.
gives the life. This is why if you fuck around with any of the AI platforms, like it's very obvious that the information coming back, even if you just read it, it's like, oh yeah, this is probably AI. Like it feels very bland.
Yeah,
There's just something human that we don't
I've messed with
understand.
the Chat GPT stuff a little bit and asked it oil and gas questions, and it gives very good textbook answers.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really easy. It's the same kind of answers I get from when we're interviewing students right out of college who have no
Yeah.
experience. And so, like, you can
Yeah.
tell, it's like you're green. You understand the concept, but there's no
Yes.
practical application there.
Yes. Yeah.
So
There's
there's
something.
information, but there's not knowledge. Definitely not wisdom.
That's another thing. I know you and I chatted about before we did
Yeah,
this, the whole wisdom thing. It's like that the information is one, that's the frustration on the cell phones. Everybody has them in their pocket. You've got all this information at your fingertips, and it's like, what do you do with it? That's the thing
yeah,
about the application of that knowledge. It's like, that's the wisdom piece. And it seems like the more information we get, the less wisdom we have. It seems like that should go the other way, and maybe it's
yeah.
because you aren't earning it. That's something there.
There's no work to acquire that knowledge, and that process of work builds an appreciation, but it also should show you like some degree of how application works within it.
Hmm.
That's the reason, like when you're taking a math class, that they make you work the problems. I have computers and programs that I use at work all the time that do a lot of math for me,
Hmm.
but understanding the problem allows me to take my problem apart when the problem is different than what the computer knows how to solve.
Yeah, there's like it's back in the day of like going to the library. You brought this
Mhm.
up. You go to the
Yeah.
library. You brought it offline before the call, not just while we were recording. But it's like you would go to the library for a book report. You would have to read constantly in order
Oh
to
yeah.
find and to stumble
Well,
across. You're like, oh, here's a paragraph that fits the thing that I was looking for.
yeah,
But you
and then you had to
gained
cite it, and then you had to go
right.
look for another book, and maybe the book you needed wasn't there, and you got to send off for it to university or go to another library or go
Yes.
find something similar, and then draw an analogy between those two things off a different topic, or find that story in another way.
Through the Dewey Decimal System for
Yeah.
for anyone that's too
Well,
young
and
to
think about
remember or
even in
even know what
just
that
that
is.
aspect of it, like you're talking, we had to at least go read 3 or 4 books, hit 3 or 4 opinions to find that information. Where now
Yeah,
someone Googles it, and the first thing that pops up has been paid for to be the first thing to pop up, by the way. And then
yeah.
people
There's
treat that like
that.
it's gold. They haven't
Yep.
read 3 or 4 opinions on it. They read the first one. And then once the algorithm knows you, it steers you towards the opinion that it knows is A, paid for, and
Yep.
then B, one that you're more likely to engage to, so they can sell you advertising while you're looking at it.
Yeah, that's the part of the confirmation bias and these algorithms that are
Yeah.
written to take advantage of the human condition. I interviewed my buddy Swale, who's he has an identity company called Iuncta. The guy's a fucking super genius. I love him.
Mhm.
He's amazing to talk to. And this is one of the things that we talked about, the psychographics behind that and how that is 1000% manipulated to take advantage of you, the user. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's a really diabolical process that has been put in place in the user interface, user experience of
Right.
these applications on these devices. It is there specifically, and Tristan Harris and I always blank on the other gentleman's name, Asa something, from The Social Dilemma.
Yeah.
They talked about the attention economy. Like, these things are designed to distract you. They're designed to get your attention. They're designed to keep you focused on them because of that one thing that you just talked about, which is the selling you something. It's the ad dollar. This gets back into my comment earlier about, if the only thing that matters is material possession, then all they're going to do is show you stuff that's like, hey, you might be better if you had this thing that you don't fucking need. But it's like, well, I'll play on your insecurities and I'll show you, something that you should buy too. And it's like, you don't need it. Like, save your money. And it's a very frustrating world.
With my 5 boys, they get a lot of lectures from me that they don't necessarily want. And so I have to package them quickly before I get the eye rolls, and they just totally tune out. But the thing that I express to them, especially with the internet, because it's such a portal of, like, it can be incredible and it can be chaos. It can be hell, The thing that I always try to impress upon them is to understand that if you can't tell what the product is, you are the product.
Yep.
And the other thing that I try to explain to them is everything that's on the internet that you see is there for a purpose. At some point, physically, somewhere in the universe, is a machine plugged into a wall, taking electricity that costs money to run, that guy can't afford to do that for nothing. Like, he's got to make money somehow. So what do they want from you? Do they want your actual straight cash? Do they want your time, your attention? Do they want you to go out and, push for them politically? Like, what is the thing that they want from you? You need to know what on the other side of the screen is being asked, because that ask is important, because you need to decide, are you willing to give that or not? And if you're not, then act accordingly. Just don't deal with it, But the other thing that I think, to the point you made earlier about the materialism, is I ask people this all the time, because I work with a lot of people that come right out of college and now they're making money in oil and gas. And, like, for the first time, they're dealing with that, but they got the student loans and they have maybe the car they sold in college, and they're trying to figure out how to negotiate the whole adulting thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I'll point out to them every time is, how many things do you own currently that you had 10 years ago? Probably not many. If you think about it, like, down to the sheets on your bed, or the computer that you use, or the phone that you have, or the car that you drive. Like, how much of that's disposable, And so then you really need to ask yourself, like, where are you putting your money, and are you buying something of value? And if the value is convenience, time, or whatever, that's fine. Negotiate that, but, like, make an intelligent decision about, like, what your opportunity cost is for, like, how much time did you have to give up in order to get the money to pay for that? Because time is the one commodity we can't replace. Like, I can always make more money. I can't get back time.
Yeah, that's a very important point. So interesting you bring that up. I look at time like it's a bank account with a balance I can never check. So to your point, you can always make more money, get a second job, work for Uber, deliver Uber Eats or whatever, or work for a delivery service. And there are people that have to have multiple jobs. But it's a thing. If you need to make more money, there are ways to do it.
Sure.
But you can't ever get time back. And once it's gone, it's gone. It's very fleeting. And we spend our time on dumb shit. People will spend, a full Sunday binge watching their favorite show on Netflix. And it's like, you have to understand, like, Netflix is not $14.99 a month anymore. It's millions, if not tens of millions, if not potentially billions of dollars in productivity that you are not making because you're not pursuing something that of value for yourself, either a dream or a goal. This is the thing about amusement. It's like, what is your muse is the thing that gives you inspiration. What is a circular is circular, a circular, not a circle. What's amusement? It's the thing that distracts you. So, and this is why I talk about material possession, and there's something more that's inherent in your neighbor and in yourself and in a reflection. Like, you have to pull away from all these things, the devices, all of it, in order to get to a place where you can actually find a better outcome. I think this is the reason why a lot of people suffer from mental health problems. A lot of people are unhappy is because they're constantly filled with distraction rather than inspiration. And you're never going to get to inspiration if you're constantly surrounding yourself and injecting yourself willfully every single day with distraction. And that time that you have that is so fucking rare and so valuable, whatever you end up doing,
Yeah.
at the time that you're doing it, that becomes the most valuable thing in your life because you do not know how much time you have. If you were born with a bank account that you can never check the balance of, how many people do you think would go to a nightclub and spend $1,000 on bottle service?
Sure.
Fucking nobody would do it.
Boone would do this all the time because when I started working for him, he was already 80. He was already a billionaire and he was already 80. He had given lots of money to OSU. He had given money to cancer research. He gave a lot of money away because he told us, like he would say this all the time. He's like, my gift is making money and giving it away because I'm good at making money. So like I make money because I can, and then I give it to things that I think are worth it. And so that's what he'd do. But one of the things he did whenever he was giving I think it was a college commencement speech, if I remember right. But he's talking to the students out there and he said, look, I'll make all of you a deal. Okay. The deal is this. You can have everything that I have. Okay. You can have the money. You can have the private jet. You can have my 46,000 acre ranch that I have out there in the Panhandle. You can have my company. You can have all my cash. But I get to switch places with you and I get to have your age and you have mine. How many of you want to make that deal? And none of them did. Yeah. And he was like, that's right. Because time is one thing I can't get back. I know that if I could go back to being 18 now with what I know, I could make way more money than what I've done. Yeah. No problem. And he's like, and that's the potential you all have that I don't have.
Yeah. That's great advice, man. And it is so incredibly true. That's always the joke of life, right? It's like you live long enough to finally figure it out and you fucking die.
It's hilarious to me. Yeah. I love this. This is one of the reasons I've been writing. And I told my wife at some point, I'm going to sit down and just write all these life lessons of things that I've learned down for my kids to have at any other rate, and anybody else who wants to read it, great. But it's one of those deals like you feel like you finally figure all these things out. And then I look up and like, I'm turning 50 next month. And it's like, all right, 50, let's run the, just the numbers on that. So I got like 30 years to live, maybe. In my family, probably closer to 20. I mean, just based off the genetics. Yeah. And so it's like, what are you going to do with that 20 years? Well, in that 20 years, I'd like to see my kids grow up. I like to see them get married. I like to see them do well. Yeah. And that goes back to what we were talking about, trying to make this world a better place because one day I'll have grandkids in it. Yeah, that's the thing, man. This is that it's like, again, this gets back to the time thing you brought up, and I'm glad you did because if you spend time thinking about how fleeting it is, you really start to value what it is that you pursue in life, and you really start to also realize that. And I think, like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whomever, like everybody wants money. Everybody wants a yacht or whatever. I mean, some people don't. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like because people think it'll fix their problems. And I can tell you riding shotgun for a billionaire for a long time, it didn't fix his problems. He had lots of problems. No. It's just different problems. Yeah. Was that, it's like, it was a Biggie's thing. It was like more money, more problems. So it's not people, again, this is what I was saying about thinking and reflective thought. Like you have to figure out what it is that will make you happy in life. It's not money. I fucking promise you. I promise you, if you had $1 billion tomorrow, if you had fame, if you had fortune, if you had instant access to everything, it is not going to make you happy. I have met people that are fucking loaded. And I mean billionaire class people. Right. They're fucking miserable. They're miserable. Yeah. They're on SSRIs for uppers. They got to take sleeping pills to get down at night. They're taking Adderall in the morning. This is a thing. Like that's not happiness. That's not happiness. It's funny. Happiness is finding fulfillment in the world around you. And the best way to do that is in service of something else other than yourself. Thank you. I promise you, if you find something to do that is not focused on yourself, that is focused on helping the world around you, you will find fulfillment. You will be a happier person for it. I've had so many people that I've talked to over the course of my life that fight with depression. Right? Depression is a real problem. And a lot of times it's chemical depression. Like it is just brain chemistry and they're not getting away from it. And the one thing that's been universal that I've told everyone as a piece of advice is if you feel really bad, go do something nice for someone else. Yeah. Something that's not beneficial to you because you will find joy in their joy. 100%. 1,000%. It's like acts of kindness, man. There's something about doing like things for other people out of the kindness of your heart and not wanting a single thing in return. It feels great. It's like in a selfish way, it actually will make you feel better when you're just a good person. And I think most people genuinely are good people. I truly do believe, like I live in downtown Chicago. I come across thousands of people all the time. Right.
I got a dog. I'm outside 3, 4, 5 times a day with him on walks. He's come in the office several times because he's trying to get me to go outside with him now and
Yeah.
try to play with him. But like you come across people all the time. Interactions are usually very, very pleasant, especially with him. Like I walk him down the street. His name's Carl. Walking down the street, people see him, they wave at him, they smile, he wags his tail. Like it's a pretty happy. Most people are very nice people, but I just feel like people have gotten lost in this fake. This lie that we've been sold that materialism is what's going to make us happy.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is why it's getting worse, is because we've taken our eye off of the thing that's more important, which is each other. We're not focused on each other anymore. We're focused only on ourselves and only on what we can get. And when that's again, it's like that power, money, and control thing. If that's the only thing that matters, you'll never have enough. You can never have enough. And that's the thing. If you point that at people and point it at helping people, that's a fucking wonderful world to live in. And my God, that's where I would love us to.
Here's where, I told you how in energy we're really bad at selling our narrative, right? Of explaining our concepts and telling us. Here's where I'm going to point the finger the opposite direction to the liberal earth types. I think they do a great job at showing us the value of nature, because I think nature has incredible value. Yeah. Okay. But to 100%. The people that are building narratives, to the Hollywoods and stuff like that, I think they get it. I really do. I think they get it, the power of a story, because we don't write stories about your money. We write stories about the relationships of the people, and money is a tool within that story. Right. And so it's one of those things that I think that when you have these movies that come out that are positive, that are uplifting, or things like that, and they suddenly blow up and everybody wonders why, like Happiness with Will Smith in it was such a good movie or something like that, it's because there's still a hunger and a desire for that's common. And it's cool because you can tell stories about other things. That's not to pick on them or anything. But I do think that that's a point that you're making that I think more people don't understand. It is the relationships. It's not the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's about and again, as we've gotten older too, younger generation. I saw an article that was about this youngest generation not having close friendships.
Yeah,
and it's like as the older generations, like a lot of close friends, and then as you start to get into younger groups, it's like you go from like, oh, I got a handful to like maybe a 3. And then it's like I have one good friend to like I'm not close with anybody. And a part of me is like, well, yeah, look at the younger generation has been sold a complete bill of bullshit that the only thing that's going to make them happy is stuff.
So here's my first world
pursue.
solution, and it's horrible to admit, right, in some ways, but I'm not apologetic about it. So if someone doesn't like it too bad, I have a swimming pool. You know what I love the most about a swimming pool? You can't take your phone in it. So when my kids come over and my kids are here with their friends and they all go out and play in the pool, this crazy thing happens. They talk to each other, and they find out stuff, and they have fun, especially if they spend a lot of time out there in a row. And like my wife and I, the number of nights that we'll roll out there and sit in the hot tub with a beverage and just talk. That's not wasted time by any stretch of the imagination. That's the person I picked to be with for the rest of my life. And I get her time, And so it's one of those deals that, like, I think with the younger generation, I look at it, and I am a little inspired at the way that they desire experience. Like they definitely, COVID taught them, hey, go visit that country you want to visit. Go do this or that. Don't do it irresponsibly where you waste all your money or put yourself in debt, but chase those experiences when you're young. But my suggestion is don't worry about the Instagram moment. Leave your phone in the car and just live it. The stories are so much better.
Yeah, man. That's sage advice. Rob Bartley, man, it's a pleasure talking to you. Tell everybody where they can find your. You said it's on Amazon. Give us the name of the books.
It's on Amazon. You can actually search Rob Bartley. I have an author page on there. I do have a website, robbartley.net, and it's mostly just kind of a portal back towards the Amazon stuff. I am on Instagram. I am on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter as me. So it's Rob Bartley 73, and so not hard to find me. And I actually go under my own name. So
okay. All right, man. Thank you so much for doing this. This is wonderful talking to you. I definitely want to do it again. We just crossed the 2. I think we are about to cross the 2-hour mark. So
nice.
I sincerely appreciate you making time and having an awesome
it was a lot of fun. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we certainly did. We certainly
We're kind
did.
of
And thank you.
scattershot. We're all over the place.
It's how my brain works, and I like to believe it's not a glitch in the system. It's
Sure.
not a defect. Or a bug. It's maybe a
Yeah.
feature.
Yeah.
But I sincerely appreciate you making time to do this, and we got to do it again soon, especially in person. Maybe the next
Yeah.
couple months, I'll be in Texas.
As I say, whenever you're down in Texas, I think when you and I were talking about you're figuring out places where you're going to move. But the great thing about
Yep,
Texas,
I got my place in
get down there.
Austin.
Yeah.
I finished all the paperwork today. Got my
Nice.
place in Austin. That's
I have, I
happening.
have I have kids down there at UT. So
Yeah, this is
not a
great, man.
problem.
We got a little space. I'm going to build out a studio to do it in person, so we're not just having to do everything virtually. So
Yeah.
we're gonna keep doing this and see what happens with it, man. Anyway, thank you so much for making time to do this. This is wonderful, and thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll see you on the internet.